be open for questions. So as ever, I'm going to keep my eye on the hands going up, and Rachel's going to look at the chat. And it's already started, but just to say we're recording this session, so just be aware of that if that's an issue for anybody. Although again, becoming standard practice these days, because it's good to share these sessions with people who can't come. So I will hand over to Sarah, and while you're presenting, we will turn our cameras off so it helps with bandwidth, if that's okay with you. So yeah, over to you.
And we are still here.
We are still here, yeah, honestly.
Yeah, you have all gone off for another cover.
No, thank you.
Can I just check, has somebody got the slides that they can put them up for me? Or
yeah, we definitely got them, and just for everyone, because we did circulate them before, it's a different set. We updated them and sent another set. So hopefully Elaine or Amy is able to share them. Brilliant, there they are. So if we could put them on presentation view, and we can, yeah, and I'm sure you can, yeah, let us know when we need to change. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, we'll do that. So, well, firstly, Dan, just big thank you for inviting me to come along. It feels ages since I've had the opportunity to come along to one of your meetings, and it's definitely pre-pandemic. And the reason why I changed the slides, so sorry for any confusion that I may have created, is I felt that Polly and Matthew would have done a very, competent job of taking you through the work we've been doing as a partnership around Flourish, and it didn't really seem necessary for me to do too much more. But I thought what would be really useful is for me to draw the links between the strategy that we have as partners in the county and what we're seeking to do to unite around children and young people and raise the county's awareness of the needs of our children in the context of so much policy change that is coming our way, not just for the local authority, although but also for the entire system. And I hope that you might find that useful. The intention is not for me to do a sort of a formal presentation, but actually to kind of bring, I suppose, some highlights from the various policy reforms that are starting to be published, and then have an opportunity to have a bit more of a conversation together around, well, what does that really mean to us as a system? How do we want to come together in a more, continue to come together strategically to think about and co-create some of the solutions that are going to be needed as they become clearer, and so hopefully that would be helpful. But it is important for me to constantly just talk about flourishing in Norfolk, because that is what we're seeking to do. That is now our shared aspiration. And if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. I suppose I also wanted to say to everybody in the room a big thank you, because in many ways we have now got ourselves to a position where we've got really strong partnership governance that is aligned to the way that we are thinking about our priorities, the way we are planning together, the way we are celebrating, as I kind of just heard the point, just as I joined, celebrating the great things that we are doing to make a difference to the lives of children and young people. And then equally, where are the areas that are a real challenge, and trying to understand those in an evidence-based way, using the intelligence that we collectively had, so that we can bear down on those areas of priority and be able then to describe the success as a result of how we're collectively working together, not just seeing ourselves as single agencies. And so what we've now got, I think, is as simplified as we possibly can, within a context of quite a lot of partnership work, particularly as it derives from the integrated care system, and I'll say a bit more about how I think the work with children and young people is knitting into that. So I've just put this slide up because I thought it might just remind us, because Polly and Matthew will be talking about the Children and Young People Strategic Alliance. But I thought it might just be useful for me to remind you that we, and many of you, have a role and do play a role in the Norfolk Safeguarding Children's Partnership as well. And therefore, the ambition that we have for children to flourish extends across both those partnerships equally. And then the work that we're doing, or have started to do very successfully, building this outcomes framework in terms of against those 8 outcomes that children and young people describe as the things that are most important to them. Having the determinants and the data to support those determinants as one single framework across both partnerships, and then everything that sits beneath, apart from those that are focused on the areas of priority in terms of task and finish groups, which we know for the Strategic Alliance is 4 core priorities in terms of prevention and early help. I'm just looking at the strategy in front of me just to make sure I don't forget. Prevention and early health, mental health and emotional well-being, special educational needs, and addressing gaps in learning. What we also have is 3 priorities in the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, which is about protecting babies, neglect, and exploitation, and they are all intrinsically linked. And you don't need me to explain why, because I know that you will be able to. You will make sense of that immediately. But what's really important that we've now developed across our entire governance arrangements around children is the stakeholder engagement and insight, and particularly the insight from young people and the greater degrees in which now they are participating more directly in service development and service improvement, and the way in which we are informing the development of skills that we need as a collective workforce. So all in all, it feels like it's really coming together in a really coherent fashion, that wherever we sit, we're looking through the same lens in terms of the aspiration that we are seeking to achieve. And what we are working on and making some success in achieving is that all the architecture that sits within the integrated care system, but below so part of the health and care partnership is that is going to be the transition from the Health and Wellbeing Board into the Health and Care Partnership, the ICS board, but also all the committees and the place-based arrangements that will exist, is that we're knitting together so that we have no duplication. The Children and Young People Strategic Alliance and Safeguarding Partnership and the local safeguarding boards all together into the integrated care system set of arrangements as well, so that there isn't another set of groups kind of emerging in a sort of a bit of a parallel universe, that it's all coming together in a joined up way. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that, because these things do take time, and we've done all of this really through a period of real challenge for us all in terms of having to turn our attentions to a multitude of challenges during this period of COVID as well, or during the, particularly over the past 18 months. But we have really arrived, I think, at a really sound and more mature place that's now giving us, I think, an excellent sense of direction, and with the work around the pledges and engaging our communities and our wide sector much more in actually taking responsibility for their role in children. So really kind of bringing life, I suppose, to that concept of safeguarding is everybody's business. So for me, this is governance can sound terribly boring, but actually also is equally very important. And I think we've got to a good place. I just wanted to acknowledge that really before I went on to.
Sarah, if I could just jump in on there, just to say, looking at that slide, it's useful because let me put the camera on. Because later on we're talking about the various reps the voluntary sector has and we're feeding back on that after this presentation. And I can see, looking at that very useful overview, that we are involved and have representation at all levels within that. Obviously, there's some exceptions, like we aren't commissioners, so we're not in the commissioning group, funnily enough. That's fairly reasonable. But it's just to echo that, and it'd be good for everyone to have this sort of framework in mind when we do that feedback session, because it does link well, and yeah. So thank you.
That's great to hear that, actually, Dan, because I'd hoped you'd say that, because I think that's the strength now that we've acquired, that we have got a genuinely shared representation of all our stakeholders in all of the all of the areas that are of important work, and that's essential if we're going to make a difference. So yeah, no, that's I'm really pleased to hear that. So again, happy for that. So if we might then move on to the other thing is just worth mentioning, actually, before, sorry, I'm messing you around, if we just do go back. So at the side there's the Public Protection Forum, Community Safety Partnership and Adult Safeguarding Board. And I just mentioned them because obviously they have a relationship too. But the Public Protection Forum is another place, actually, and I'm not completely sure if that's probably the one place where the voluntary sector isn't sitting, but actually that's a group of chairs of all of the respective partnership arrangements that we have in the county, so children and adults, so that we have a single forum where we can just check out that no one agenda has somewhere fallen through a gap, and that one board or partnership is assuming another partnership is attending to a particular set of issues and then discovering that actually it's not being properly attended to anywhere. So that is a bit of a safety net. That's the intention there. And when we were in COVID mode, particularly at the very first lockdown, when we all needed to turn our attention to the safety of our communities, and with children in mind, and young children very particularly, as well as adolescents, that we had no eyes and ears from the system to provide a protective lens. The Public Protection Forum became the most important place, where we collapsed all of the partnership boards and went straight to that and agreed how we would work together and develop campaigns and forms of communication that also gave us a strength that we might not have had if we hadn't had that forum in existence. So it's not a place where we make decisions, but it's a place where we utilise all of the expertise across all of the partnerships. So it's just something that is there and probably don't mention very often, but has been very important. So I will now take you to the next slide. I just thought it'd be worth really just mentioning just how significant the policy change is going to be now, and I would suggest probably for the next decade. And sometimes it's quite hard to get our head around those lengths of time. But I think we're all very well aware that when there is policy change, that it does take some significant time for those things to be fully implemented and to achieve the intentions. And then often more policy comes along before we've had a real chance of, in some instances, being able to fully embed what we were trying to achieve. But what we have now is something quite unique and unusual, and that is so many things coming all at the same time. And I suppose I'll go not entirely from the bottom up, but I think people in the room will have some familiarity with the Levelling Up white paper, the kind of concepts in there around devolution, having a greater understanding of where our communities need greater degrees of investment. And that then links for me to the Health and Social Care Act, not just in terms of the governance of the NHS, the way in which we, together with the NHS as an entire system, not just as a local authority either for that matter, absolutely, and use population health data to fully understand the wider determinants of health and areas of disadvantage that will feed into those wider determinants of health in terms of our local place. And then I want to pick up for you how there is those themes then start to run through the very specific papers that are children's related, which also point to local place, the way of devising intelligence and information that gives us a sense of local needs as well as whole county needs. And then a real paradigm shift, one that we've been talking about locally now for years and years and years, and around how do we move to a place where we can support and help those who need that support and help at the earliest possible time, in order that where we have a need for specialist interventions with families and for children's protection, that we do that with a high degree of expertise, knowledge and skills, and we create space for the effective practice to exist, because we've rebalanced the system in such a way that enables that to happen. And that brings a major cultural shift, which we are trying to do through our existing strategies. So it aligns incredibly well to our aspiration that we have for every child in the county to flourish, but will bring some extra levers, I think, as it becomes clearer through the reform that is becoming more apparent. So I wonder, before I start just picking some specific themes out from the white paper, the green paper and the social care review, can I just check in the room, has anybody had any opportunity to look at any of these? Just out of curiosity, there's no particular reason why anybody would have done specifically, but it'd be quite interesting just to see.
Yeah, so do raise your hand or put something in the chat.
Yeah, just be useful, or if it's completely kind of new. So
yeah, I just think. Yeah, Sarah, I just think from my perspective, the example I've had in definitely with regard to the involvement of our sector in mental health services, there's been a lot more opportunities, and I think a lot of these directions of travel have opened up opportunities to work more with the voluntary sector. I know we have particular issues locally with our mental health system, and the other green paper that might be of interest to us is the procurement green paper, and how that could make the relationship between the local authority and the voluntary sector a bit more long-term and relational, which is something that we've been asking for a long time. So obviously that's still at an early stage, but that's something else that I think will help facilitate a lot of these things. So just to make those 2 points, but if anyone else has got any points, do raise your hand or put something in the chat. Thanks.
So yeah, no, that's really helpful. And yes, so there are other things that are not on this list for sure. And the other one that springs to mind is the Post-16 and Skills Act, which is now just taken by the scent. And that is another significant one. Has its relationship with the Levelling Up white paper in terms of preventative, but apprenticeships, jobs, higher education, and so on. So yeah, there's a real interrelationship between
so question from Rachel. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I've done obviously, as you would expect, probably done quite a lot of thinking and looking into the social care review, and I think there's some real challenges in there. And one of the things that Josh McAllister starts to highlight is the for-profit sector that is obviously thriving within social care, but the bit probably obviously I would be promoting kind of the voluntary sector, looking at working with local authorities more in that area. But one of the things that I really like about it is he starts to talk about the concept of love and wanting people to be leaving the care system with at least 2 loving relationships, and for me that's it's kind of taking the lid off a bit of a social care taboo, which is talking about love. How do we love? What kind of love are we talking about? Can you professionally love? All of those things. And so I think there's some real exciting elements to that, but I think there's some massive challenges within there as well.
Absolutely, and I'm going to come back to that point because that's a really important one. And again, I think what I find reassuring about that as well is that our focus on relationships and being really clear in our own minds here in Norfolk how relationships matter to affect change, and for children to be able to have long-lasting relationships within loving families is absolutely core to effective and good practice, and it sits at the heart of the social care reviews, which I am really pleased and delighted to see. I'm going to say just a couple of things then about these papers, because I just think...
Just a question from Andy before that.
Oh, yes.
That's okay. Yep, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah, just one thing that you pointed out, which was around the devolution and the relationship. I would just wonder, if you have a comment around the relationship between Norfolk County Council and district councils in the delivery of some of this, because we talk about a lot of local place, local needs analysis, and local agency. I'm just wondering about whether at some point you could just address that issue of how it's going to work together, because we've got this amazing, you've just pointed out this amazing strategic framework at the county council level, but then there's a lot of kind of opportunity for district councils as well. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe comment on that. For example, we see that with the Social Prosperity Fund. I'm just wondering if that would be something you could comment on, please.
I can comment on in part, because I would say that, there's like all partnerships, there's more distance to travel. So, the district councils, from a children's perspective, particularly around the children's strategy, they're represented on all our partnerships. So we have district councils as part of our strategic alliance and a safeguarding partnership. They have shared in the sign up to that single shared aspiration and vision for children to flourish. And we are talking to them equally around what their intentions are in terms of the pledges that they will make very directly to that strategy overall, as well as through the existing work that they do. And I have conversations with their chief execs and directors throughout the year to look at how they can be thinking around their own business planning, their own strategic planning, and how do they make the link between the county aspiration for children and the work that they do as a district council. I'm not saying we've got it entirely cracked. I don't think that would be the right thing to say, but there is a real, because why wouldn't all professionals want to come together around ensuring that children can lead their best life? So there's no resistance professionally from the district councils to engage. It's actually practically how they do it and how they're able to commit to it. And those are the kinds of conversations that we have. But they've done some great work with us, particularly around children in care and care leavers, in terms of contributing to the offer of support for our children in care, recognising their corporate parenting responsibilities, because it extends to district councils as much as it does the county council, and then the exemptions that they've created for our care leavers in relation to council tax, for example. So there's some really nice examples of very direct work that the district's doing to contribute to the children we all work with, and to share in that single vision. But there is and there's going to be more and more we will always be needing to do. I don't know if that's helpful, Andy. So, you know, we're always on a journey, I think. And I'm trying to take, and there's always the politics, and I'm talking about the professional relationships rather than. There will be some political differences, but I think even where the political differences lie, we can find a place where we can all agree when it comes to children, young people generally. In terms of the schools white paper, I just thought it would, because I think all of us, one way or another, has a relationship with schools. And I think what we all know is over the last few years, you know, there's been quite a fragmentation in systems. So this policy, this white paper, which already has started to convert into acts very quickly, is trying to tackle a few things really. The whole academy landscape, so that by 2030 we will have a fully academised structure, and therein there is a multitude of questions that I know you will have, and I'm just keeping my eye on the time here, so there's only a few minutes left, so I don't want to spend too much, don't want to go over the agenda. But so there's the academisation agenda there, but also we are in an education investment area, which means that what that will hopefully bring for schools is some investment to try and tackle some of the areas that they have challenges in terms of teacher recruitment, focusing on areas of English and maths and sciences, where there is even greater difficulties in bringing the expertise that they need into schools and supporting those children who need more help. And then the strengthening of a national arm's length curriculum board that will deliver more national standard sets of planning for teaching and learning, will take some of the burden that makes teaching itself then more attractive. But interestingly too, giving the local authority a new duty, a strengthened duty, but a collaborative standard. And that is to set out very clearly a contract with schools. I suppose I wouldn't use that word, you know, as such, but it's setting out how, as a set of the school system as a partner, will work with all of us as partners and the local authority to fulfil the needs of children in a holistic way, not just in terms of their teaching and learning. So it's returning the school system back to reminding the duty of Section 10 in the Children Act of the duty to cooperate, which indeed is why we have the Strategic Alliance. So it starts to knit that together. The SEND Green Paper is just now out for consultation. There are 8 core issues identified in the Green Paper, and for those of you who work or come across in your work children with special educational needs and disabilities, you will know that this landscape has been very fraught. It's been very, very challenging for parents, feeling that they aren't always able to see the needs of their children fully met. And from a local authority perspective and from a school's perspective, we don't get value for money in the system to deliver for those needs. So there's quite a significant set of changes in this Green Paper in an attempt to rebalance that so that there's more simplified ways to develop education healthcare plans when needed. But actually the full push yet again, absolutely, is mainstream education and providing the support in mainstream provision for children with a whole range of additional needs. So it has a relationship, therefore, with the Children's Social Care Review in terms of a focus on much earlier support. And then from a financial point of view, trying to balance the banding and tariffs of both the state sector and the private sector, so that we have a greater level of equalisation in terms of cost, but also in terms of quality. So a really interesting landscape there, and that we envisage will become a white paper towards the end of this year. And all of these, as there is a government appetite to get all of these through some form of legislative change where it's needed by 2024. So lots of things don't need legislative change in terms of the review, but those things that do, that would be the quickest. That's the quickest timeline in which that can be achieved. And then the Children's Social Care Review, well, just quickly to say, this is very, very welcome, this review. Yes, it is ambitious. Yes, it is significant in terms of the shift in culture, the way in which we organise, the way we work, and the way we also come together, not just as public services, but also the wider with our voluntary and community services as well, so that we actually knit our collective expertise together in the interests of providing help, family help, and a greater focus on children experiencing family-based care, finding a way of equaling up how we support our extended families to provide care for children, and then where we need particular areas of expertise, that we focus on the creation and development of raising the levels of skills. And for those of you who have looked at this review, there's references here to child protection experts, for example, and that's partly because of what has arisen through the National Safeguarding Panel. Now, I've realised I've given myself an over-ambitious expectation of me taking you through a lot more detail of what's here, but I think the point I was trying to make for you today is there's a lot on the horizon. Our strategy collectively is absolutely bang on, which is great. And what we're wanting to do as we progress and get clearer is be talking with you as a voluntary community sector in a strategic way and in an operational way, in terms of making sure that your skills and knowledge play a relevant part in the development of all of the things that will fall out of the change in the way we work in Norfolk going into the future. So on one level it's quite daunting, but on the other level I would actually say it's exciting, and it's exciting because of the level of maturity that we've arrived at and the governance that we've got that allows us to kind of do this, I think, in a way that hopefully will make some sense. So Dan, I'll probably stop there.
Thanks.
And then if there's more questions, happy to take them.
Yeah. Thanks. Any last questions before we sort of sum up? And obviously thank Sarah for her time. I can't see any hands up. I'm sure Rachel. I've got a question from Kirsty.
Sorry, hope that's okay. So I had a question. So I was just thinking back to kind of when you put up the structure and things. So I'm actually VCSE rep for the Prevention and Early Help Board, and I just was quite interested to see it listed on your structure as a task and finish group, because when I consider like the terms of reference, I just wonder what the finish is. Why wouldn't that be something that would want to be continued? That I don't know if that's.
No, I mean, I think I can't remember what exactly now. It says stuff and areas of priority. So
right.
So yeah. So I may need to go back and put the words on that, Kirsty. It's a good thing you've picked up there. Prevention and early help is going to be a forever focus, isn't it? But I think what we do want to do is focus in on the specific things we want to improve and change. I think what we've had in the past sometimes is serial priorities and never actually focused in on the things we want to have impact on. So the key thing is Absolutely, there'll be a strategic direction, but actually what do we want to have a key focus on in order to affect change and being able to measure success. So I hope that's, so
Yeah.
I'll think
I just
about
thought it was
that
worth
just
picking
in
up on,
terms
because
of
obviously,
description.
yeah, because I'm going to feed back on kind of where we're getting to with
Yeah.
that board, and I didn't want to be misrepresenting it then if it's kind of it's going to close in 12 months or something like that. So
Yeah, I didn't
no,
think that
no,
was,
I mean,
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, and actually it's you know, when I of the light touch I've just given to those policy reforms, you know, that board particularly has an extensive life throughout all of those policy reforms.
Good.
So yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just any last questions before we wrap up? I don't think so. Yeah, I'm assuming, Kirsty, you're finished. You've just still got your hand up. So once you're okay, yeah, and I think what's important is we've got a structure and a framework in Flourish to take on board all these inevitable changes and white papers and changes in laws and green papers, and it makes us more ready for them. I think that's a really positive mood. So I'm going to thank you, Sarah, for your time. I don't know if you're still there. You seem to be frozen on our screen, but
Yeah.
if you, oh great. So
I'm
thank,
still here.
yeah, we can still hear you then. So thanks ever so much for your time. Really appreciate that. And there is a lot to take on, which is all the more important that we're collaborating in the way that we are, and all the more important that we have a way and a method of taking on all this change. And you know, we've got a strategy in Norfolk with Flourish that we can keep going for as long as we want to, and all these other things can come into that strategy, and that means we're not chasing our tail. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for your time ever so
Absolutely.
much.
That consistency, yeah, is great.